Would anyone like to have a recorded conversation? No? And so this message is to who? The local community or YouTube, Discord, TikTok, Instagram, email. This is to institutions. This is for the people. These are to those who are in my circle and those who are in my square. What is the square? It is those whom are in your proximity, but you do not necessarily know. Would anyone like to say anything to the world? No. Say siete? Ho-ho. And so, would you like to share anything with the world, sister? And so, this is our First Amendment right, but it's also our perhaps potential for some of us to express that the rallying point isn't necessarily a fixed point. One place, one platform, one website, one geographical location from which next level principles, rights, identifications can begin to be integrated into the system. And so, can you see that? Just for awareness. So, what binds us together? In truth, in spirit, in heart. And that is the will to transcend our consciousness while at the same time perhaps enjoy our consciousness without always feeling like we need to transcend, but yet not feel like we also need to get, not feeling like we need to get attached to a particular thing or way of life that is fixed through a system, an ideology, but nevertheless, what is possible today? Well, whoever receives this message, I think what is important to share at this time is there is a need for a group conversation. And someone will say when and where, with whom, why, and where. Maybe I already said that, but there are different platforms, local and cybernetic. Would you like to share anything to the world, brother? That might be a little daunting, but if anyone wants to have a recorded conversation, you're welcome. I feel like the next step is inviting those in our circle into a group conversation. And this circle of ours can include maybe just a few, can at least someone. But considering the whole of humanity, would you like to share anything with the world?
Sorry, sir. I don't know English.
It's okay.
I'm Chinese.
Okay.
I don't know English.
It's okay.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, would any of you like to share with the world? You know, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, uh, or it could just be, you know, to your grandparents, or maybe it's to our dreams. But anyways, it's hard to have trust in a group conversation. But I think a positive note would be considering the multiplication factor, if there is resonance with someone within our spectrum of consciousness, and if any of you want to say anything to the world, you're welcome to. But a lot of us, I think, are just waiting for someone to start the conversation. It doesn't matter the platform, it doesn't matter whether it's local or on the internet, but at the same time, I think there is a general overall long-term need for balancing both of them, not feeling fully dependent on one or the other. But at the same time, the internet is still in its infant stage in comparison to where it might be through the next generation. But the point of importance to share is, I guess, what would we tolerate and what would we not tolerate as a group? Why is the camera not on me? Well, there's no separation. So, well, we would not wish to tolerate certain forms of. Let's start out. What can we agree on? Well, communication is important. And I think what we would also agree is violence in response to communication that we disagree with as something that is intolerable. Another thing that we can agree on is that leadership should be democratically elected and monitored and held accountable. What does that all mean? A lot of big words, but rather, how shall I say? Would you like to say anything to the world? But essentially, we need voices about how we can share the different perspectives. how we can, how shall we say, call out the elements and ideas of evil, the strategies of evil, and also recognize that evil's existence ultimately is not real, considering the long-term vision, as it is not sustainable. But it can seem like it can exist for a long time. But we need voices to speak out about our rights, our story, our gifts, our talents, our dreams, our creativity. We are in need of people to open themselves up to others whom they might not know, I might not know, and see if they would like to share anything. And so this is somewhat speaking for myself, but at the same time, it seems that there is a need. If anyone wants to share anything with the world, you can share it. You're welcome. Spread love. Spread love, he says. So I think what's hard for us to imagine is we can go to almost any place and share what we might see as a perspective that can shift certain potentials whereby people begin to consider and perhaps even believe that this is a platform from which we can graduate from. But we have to be willing to expose the elements of the elite and the ego. And there are different sources out there, but discerning which sources come from a higher vibration or a higher truth is not always easily detectable until we've had a certain amount of immersion and experience in that particular thing that might seem to take our attention away for a time from being able to express ourselves in balance to the people in our heart and in our reason. Would anyone like to share anything with the world? We shall rise above the matrix and see that the 1% truly has nothing on. The emperor has no clothes on, but who will point the finger? And the emperor might say, oh, you have 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. And so there's always a counter argument. But what's important, I guess, is inviting those that we might think have the potential to withstand the illusions of the duality consciousness, good versus evil, right versus wrong, punishment versus reward. And also recognize that there is a need to find ways to communicate in different ways. And so presenting the people with a path that can transcend this sense of powerlessness without turning into a power-hungry person. There are forces that will remove the darkness or the division if we see that those forces are not necessarily outside of us. Some might refer to them as principles, others as intelligent beings, but there are forces here, and we have the right to talk with anyone about them at any time. Does anyone want to have a conversation about anything? Dreams? The purpose? Anyways. And so, what is the next step? Inviting those on our platforms that have the closest frequency. Would you like to have a conversation, brother, about anything? Would any of you like to have a conversation about anything? And so, there is a need to bring transparency. Would anyone like to have a conversation about anything? Can we rise above the 1% who want to own the world? Do we have a fire in our heart? Anyways, it is possible to graduate from planet Earth. We do not have to keep returning back as a baby without memory of the previous experiences we have had. But there needs to be constant vigilance within our institutions and for a grassroots movement to institute our rights to basic needs and psychological, spiritual needs. This is going to call for people to try to demonstrate and publicize and, well, make open our own potential that also records how each individual has many possible different histories. And that, well, some might even be from planets that are very different than ours. Would any of you like to say anything to the world? But anyways, probably need costumes. Costumes would be good. Would you like to have a conversation about anything? Would you like to have a conversation about anything? No. And so, the guardian of knowledge. Or wisdom. Would you like to have a conversation on the record? Would you like to have a conversation on the record? And so, the response ability is a very interesting phenomenon. And so the last point, is there any last point? Is there a final point to all of this? There is no ultimate point. But I think it is time to make more transparent our experience with those in our circle and our square. And then we might be able to begin to recognize or experience the triangle, the fire, the presence, the sun. Would any of you like to have a conversation on the record? All right, we've shared our piece. And so if you are receiving this message, that means perhaps the next level is nigh at hand.